up, everyone? Welcome back to Laura Likes Books. I'm Laura, I like books, and today we're going to be doing my April wrap-up. So all the books that I read in the month of April. I did have a pretty busy month in April. My birthday was on the 13th, and I just had a lot of work and other stuff going on. So that being said, I did read 10 books in April. And out of the 10 books I read, 7 of them were 5 stars. So it was the best reading month I think I've ever had. And I don't know if it was just like a weird fluke or if I'm just getting better at knowing my own reading tastes. I'm not really sure. But either way, I had 7 5-star books and 2 4 stars and 1 3 star. So nothing below a 3 star. So the first book I want to talk about was my only 3 star of the month, and it was an Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina. This is my third book by Sherry Lapina. I read The Couple Next Door, gave that one, I think like 2 or 3 stars. I really didn't care for it. And then I read Someone We Know, and I gave that one, I think 4 stars. That one was a lot better, in my opinion. But overall, she's not one of my favorites as far as thrillers. But this one sounded really interesting to me because it was pitched as more of just like an Agatha Christie style mystery, which I love. And the setting is totally up my alley. We have like a snowed-in resort. We have a group of people staying at this resort, and there's a blizzard. And the power goes out and people start dying, and so it did remind me a lot of And Then There Were None, which I enjoyed. I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, there wasn't anything like super unbelievable. I mean, everything kind of like made sense, but for me it just wasn't memorable at all. Like, I pretty much have already forgotten most of the details. It was just kind of a run-of-the-mill mystery for me. I would still recommend it, especially to people who enjoy that kind of locked room, closed circle mystery. It definitely fit that description, and there wasn't anything like overtly wrong with it. It just, for me, it just wasn't anything that I'm going to be thinking about in the future. And so it was just middle of the road 3 star for me. Next up, we have Temper by Lane Fargo. This one was a 4-star read for me. But we basically have this girl, Kira, who is an aspiring actress. She lives in Chicago with her best friend slash friend with benefits type situation. She is really struggling, and then she gets an opportunity to work with this director, Malcolm. Yeah, Malcolm, that's his name. He's like this kind of infamous director who apparently is really hard to work with and pushes his people really far. And, you know, she's just heard a lot of like negative stuff about him, but she's like, whatever, I can handle it. You know, I'm a professional. I can handle whatever anyone throws at me. So we're getting her perspective, and then we're also getting the perspective of this other lady, Joanna. Malcolm and Joanna have a company together that directs these plays, is the best way to describe it. And so we're getting Joanna's perspective as well. And she has been working with Malcolm for like 20 years or something like that. It's been a really long time. And so over the course of the book, things just get like more intense. With Kira working with Malcolm and Joanna's perspective, it all kind of melds together, and I can't really say much more than that, but it was intriguing. It held my interest. I think for me, the reason it wasn't just like a 5-star is I didn't really care for the ending that much, and I do feel like some of the scenes were drawn out a little bit when they didn't need to be. It could have been a little bit shorter and more like concise and to the point, but it did build really good tension. It, you know, like I said, it held my interest the entire time. I was really interested to know what was going to happen, but I would definitely call it more of a slow burn. It's not even really a mystery. I don't know, I guess I would call it a thriller, but suspense thriller, but more of a slow burn. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about that one without spoiling anything. I did enjoy it. Next up, we have Bunny by Mona Awad. This one I also gave 4 stars. This book was really weird. I don't even know where to start with this one. It was bizarre, in a good way. I mean, I liked it, but we basically have this girl, Samantha, and she goes to this really prestigious, like, art school. I think it's an art school. She has these 4 girls in her cohort who have, you know, the same classes and teachers that she has. And these 4 girls all call each other Bunny, and they're all really weird. It's a little bit like Mean Girls mixed with The Craft, mixed with Frankenstein. Oh, it's just so weird. So yeah, these 4 girls, they do these like group hugs. They all call each other Bunny. They don't call each other by their real names. And Samantha pretty much hates them and thinks they're weird, and they're just like this little clique. But Samantha ends up getting an invitation to their smut salon, which is what they call their little gatherings. And so she ends up entering this world that these girls inhabit. I really don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just say that they're using these meetings to bring out their creative side. And it gets weird. Like really weird. I have realized that I don't love books that are like too abstract. I don't typically love books where it feels like nothing's solid. I don't know if that makes sense. It's almost like you're floating on top of it and you can't really get too close. It's almost like you're in the periphery of the story where you just never actually feel invested because the writing doesn't let you get too close. I don't know if that all makes sense, but I just felt a little bit disconnected from the story. But that being said, I did like it a lot. I thought it was super interesting, the concept, and there was just a lot of really weird scenes that I actually loved. I listened to it on audiobook, and it was the girl who does the narration is so good. Some of the narration was very creepy, and I think that added a lot to it. So yeah, overall 4 stars. Next up we have, let's see if I can pronounce this, Recitatif by Toni Morrison. This book, I gave 5 stars. Actually, all of the rest of the books were 5 stars. And actually, it's really hard to put them in order because I loved all of them so much. But I'm just kind of going pretty much in order, but some of them are interchangeable, I would say. Yeah, so in this one, we have a woman named Twyla and a woman named Roberta. And this book is so interesting because you know that one of these women is white and one of them is black, but she never tells you which is which. And so it's really interesting because this book is sort of an experiment for the reader. And it's sort of a social experiment to see, you know, how your own biases and your own judgments, you know, play out. And there's actually a really long introduction in here by Zadie Smith, and it's actually like half the book. But in that introduction, she talks about how, you know, as a reader, you know, these scenes will happen where it's describing their clothing or what food they like, or, you know, just simple stuff like that. And as a reader, you're sort of, it puts you in this position where you're sort of like, oh, well, this one is the white one because of these clothes, or this one is the black one because of this food that she likes. And so I love it. It calls into question those judgments that we make without realizing. Essentially, we have, like I said, Roberta and Twyla. They meet each other as kids in this sort of group home situation where both of them are there like temporarily. Then they meet each other again when they're like in their late teens, and then they meet again in their 20s and in their 30s. And so they have all of these interactions with each other, and, you know, times where they're sort of on opposite sides of, you know, a political debate or, you know, whatever. And there were moments where I was like, I was pretty sure I knew which was which. And then like something would happen and I would be like, no, well, that doesn't really make sense. And that's the point. You're not supposed to know. They never tell you, you're never gonna know. No one will ever know. Which, you know, I want to be frustrated about because I like things to be wrapped up in a nice, neat package. I like things explained to me. And this book does not do that. But ultimately, I'm glad. I absolutely loved it. I think everyone should read this book. It's really short, like I said. It took me like an hour to read the whole thing, including the introduction. So highly, highly recommend. Next up, we have The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. This, again, is a teeny tiny book. This book also took me like an hour to read. And I gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. I really can't get into this without spoiling. It's not even really like a mystery. It's more of, I would say, like a sci-fi or like sci-fi thriller. But there are twists, so I won't get too into it. But essentially we have this man, Adir. He is taking the British citizenship test. And he has a wife and 2 kids, a son and a daughter. He's just really excited to become a British citizen. And so he goes in to take this test, this multiple choice test to make that happen. And then some stuff goes down that, how can I be vague? Some stuff happens, it takes a turn. So good. Please just read this. This, to me, called in so many ethical questions, so much food for thought, so much like, what would I do in this situation? You know, how could anyone deal with this situation? Like I said, very short. If you're interested in this at all, please pick it up. It is so good, you won't regret it. Next up, another 5-star read. We have Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a short story collection. I would classify this as kind of horror, kind of sci-fi, definitely short story, feminist fiction. It is so good. Some stories were obviously better than others, but in general, I adored this book. So a couple of my favorites, The Husband Stitch was one of my favorites. Also, let me refresh on what the names are. There's one called 8 Bites that I really loved, Difficult at Parties, and there was one called Especially Heinous, which is basically small snippets of each episode of Law and Order SVU, which I have no knowledge of prior to this. It's actually really funny because it's called Especially Heinous, and it's like I said, it's like a little snippet from each episode, but I just thought it was like, that's what it was just the description of each episode, like in a funny way. Then I get toward like, I mean, it's pretty early, like season 1 still. And I come across this episode that says, the ghost of one of the murdered, misburied underage models begins to haunt Benson. She has bells for eyes, tiny brass ones dangling from the top of each socket. The hammer's not quite touching her cheekbones. The ghost does not know her own name. She stands over Benson's bed, the right bell tinkling faintly, and then the left, and then the right again. This happens 4 nights in a row at 2:07 a.m. Benson starts sleeping with a crucifix and pungent ropes of garlic because she does not understand the difference between vampires and murdered teenagers. Not yet. And so I was listening on audiobook, and that happened, and I was like, wait, what? What? Like, I didn't know Law and Order had like supernatural stuff. And so it just, yeah, it becomes like the first few episodes are just pretty normal. And then by the end, it's just like chaos. And I loved it. And then, yeah, like I said, probably my favorite story was The Husband Stitch. And I'd never heard of this before, this concept of the husband stitch. just in case you aren't familiar, it's essentially when a woman has a baby and the doctor stitches her back up and puts an extra stitch to make intercourse more pleasurable for the husband. And that appalled me, obviously. And so I looked it up because I just could not believe that this was a real thing. And it was, and is. I mean, obviously it's not called that now. I can't say if it still happens or not, but back in the day, it did happen a lot. It was a real thing. Even if they didn't call it that, that's what they were doing. This is why I believe that like doulas and things like that are so important, because in my opinion, women need to have the information. They need to have somebody there advocating for them and their choices, and the ability to say like what they're okay and not okay with, So each story deals with kind of different aspects of women's bodies, but all of them in some way deal with violence against women's bodies. There's another story about a lesbian relationship where one of the women is physically abusive to the other one. So it's kind of a broad spectrum of different types of violence, but all of them are so rich and have so many important things to talk about. Really quick, another quote that I really loved from The Husband Stitch. The main aspect of that story was, it was like a retelling of the story, The Green Ribbon. So the woman in the story has a green ribbon tied around her neck, and her husband, she gives him everything. And this one thing, she tells him not to touch her green ribbon. And so at this one point, he keeps trying to touch it, and she keeps telling him, no. And she says, "I've given you everything you ever asked for. Am I not allowed this one thing? I want to know. You think you want to know, I say, but you don't. Why do you want to hide it from me? I'm not hiding it. It just isn't yours." And I love that because it speaks to the entitlement that men in particular feel over women and their bodies. I'm not trying to get all like political or anything, but for me personally, that speaks to me. I think that the entitlement that some men feel over women and their bodies, the fact that she literally, like the one thing that she asked him to do, or not to do, he felt entitled to that and had to know why he wasn't allowed, instead of just accepting that this is her choice. Like I said, everything else, like she gave him her body, literally everything, but it wasn't good enough. He still felt entitled to this one small thing that she asked him not to do. And I think that's what stuck with me the most. Sorry, that was really a long explanation, but I just genuinely enjoyed every story in here, and I highly recommend this for women, men, pretty much everyone. Next up, we have The Night Shift by Alex Finley. This one was my second book by him. I also read Every Last Fear last year, I think, the beginning of last year. And I believe I gave that one 5 stars as well. And then The Night Shift, I also gave 5 stars. There's just something about his writing that is so compelling to me. This one we essentially have, it's Y2K, it's New Year's Eve 1999, and these 4 teens and their manager are working at a Blockbuster, and they get killed. There's 3 of the teens and the manager get killed. There's one survivor, this girl Ella. And then we jump to, I think it's like 15 years in the future, and the almost same exact circumstance happens again at like an ice cream shop. And so the book is spent basically trying to figure out how these crimes are connected. There's, like I said, one survivor in each case. And so they kind of are trying to figure this out together. We're also getting a third perspective from from this guy Chris, who is the brother of the original guy who was suspected in the Blockbuster killings. And then if you've read Every Last Fear, the FBI agent in that book, Sarah Keller, she is also in this book. You don't really need to have read the other one or anything, but it's just kind of a nice little bonus, I think. So we have all these people trying to figure out what's going on, who killed everybody, how are they related. It was just so good. The actual mystery part was fairly obvious, I thought, but that didn't at all take away from my enjoyment. I love the characters, just like Every Last Fear. That was what I loved the most, was the character work. And this book was no different. And I also loved the kind of, I mean, a lot of the book doesn't actually take place in the past. It's just kind of mentioned. I was like 15 on Y2K. I remember being at my friend's house for a New Year's Eve party, and I remember being like, everyone talking about Y2K and being like, you know, freaked out. And I think deep down I was also freaked out, but I didn't want anyone to know. So it's just like, oh my God, like, you're all so stupid, like nothing's gonna happen. But inside I was like, oh my God. Like, we're all gonna die. And so pretty much any mention of like that time period I'm gonna love. But yeah, so 5 stars, just a really compelling read. Again, the mystery isn't like, you know, it's not like crazy shocking twists or anything, but yeah, it just, I mean, I read it in like a day. I stopped all the other stuff I was reading and just read that. Next up, we have The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. This was a horror thriller, I guess. I would categorize it kind of psychological horror-ish. Very specific, I know. But in this one, this book was so good. It's very confusing at first, but we essentially have this guy Ted, and he has a daughter named Lauren and a cat named Olivia. And a lot of the chapters are told from the cat's perspective, which I thought was really neat. And we also have this lady named Dee who lost her sister some years back. Her sister went missing, and it's kind of like this unsolved mystery. And so that's pretty much all I can say. It's best to go into this book knowing pretty much nothing. The book is very polarizing, I feel like, but for me, the twist totally worked. I was shocked by a few things that happened, and I read it like so fast. I like had to know what was happening, because it was it reminded me of like the unsettling aspects reminded me of I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. That same kind of like what's going on feeling, of like nothing's really happening, but I don't like it. Nothing's happened, but I don't like it. That's how this book was. Again, just go into it pretty much blind. I promise. It'll become clear, but the less you know, the better. But yeah, 5 stars, amazing read. Next up, we have another Lane Fargo book. This is They Never Learn. I read this one first, then I read Temper right after because I loved this one so much. This one is definitely better. I gave this 5 stars. And this book I've heard talked about so much, and no one that I've heard talk about it disliked it, so that's why I picked it up. And I agree, it's amazing. So I can't say anything without spoiling it, but I will just say that the twist that this book has is one that I always end up guessing. And maybe I just guess the same twist for every single book I read. And I'm bound to be right sometimes. That could definitely be the case. But what I've noticed is that I always guess it, but I always end up giving the book 5 stars every time. So in this one, we have a lady named Scarlett who is a professor at Gorman University. And Scarlett has a interesting hobby. Every year she picks like the most atrociously horrible man on campus and she kills him. And so it's kind of like Dexter, but you know, she's a professor is basically the only difference. But she's killing people who have done horrible, heinous things to women. And simultaneously, we have chapters from Carly, who is a freshman at this university and kind of just trying to make her way through her freshman year and having a roommate and having all these new classes, and we're kind of following her as well. And that's about all I can say. But this book was so good. I guess you could call it dark academia. The idea of her kind of, I mean, obviously what she's doing is wrong. We all know this. But the fact that she's protecting women who have been hurt, you know, it's just, you can't help but root for her at the same time and, you know, just be appalled on, like, with her, with what she's witnessing from these students, and the fact that the school, of course, isn't going to do anything about it. I guess I read a lot of like feminist literature this month without really meaning to, but yeah, it's that same kind of, you know, men are running things, they're not going to do anything to help, you know, they're just gonna, it's boys will be boys attitude, and you know, she's going to do something about it, and so you kind of are rooting for her, and it's just super entertaining. And then finally we have Goodnight Beautiful by Amy Malloy. I read her other book, The Perfect Mother. I think I read it in 2020, I want to say. And I gave it 5 stars. I guessed the twist in that one, but it was still so good and I couldn't stop reading it. This one, Goodnight Beautiful, I did not guess anything. So I always see people describe books as like jaw-dropping, and I think that's so cliche and so like, really? Like, your jaw dropped, really? My jaw actually dropped reading this book twice. There were 2 things that happened that made me literally like, what? Excuse me, pardon? A little unbelievable, I guess. That's a complaint that I've seen, is it's, you know, you have to suspend your disbelief. I don't mind doing that. I don't mind doing that as long as there's some realistic aspect, and I think that definitely fits here. Basically in this one we have this psychologist, Sam, and he is has a new wife, Annie. They've just recently been married, and they live in New York, but they moved to Sam's like small town, hometown that he grew up in, to take care of his mother because she is dying essentially. And so he's just starting his new practice. There's also a vent where his sessions can be heard through this event. And so yeah, it gets really interesting. And that's pretty much all I can say about it. I'm so good at explaining books I love. No, but it's hard because I don't, the reason that I love them is the exact thing I can't say. But just trust me, that's really good. Finally, I'll just say that even though I guessed the twist in The Perfect Mother, I still feel like it was a twist that isn't done very often and was really, really well done. And this one I think was even more well done. Well, there's really 2 big twists, and both of them were exceptional in my opinion. Maybe, now I have to downplay it because I feel like I have to justify why I love it because I've seen like mixed reviews. Maybe if you're a more seasoned thriller reader, maybe you've seen it before. I don't know. Maybe that's what people's issue is, or maybe I feel like maybe some people think it's a little bit unrealistic, but I don't care. I thought it was great. So that is gonna do it. That's all 10 books that I read. Like I said, I feel like April was probably my best reading month ever. I had like all 5 stars, and then like pretty much I had like 6 5 stars in a row, and I was just like, oh my god, like I might have all 5 stars this month, and then I didn't, but it was pretty close. And so yeah, either I'm getting better at knowing what I like, or I just got really lucky. I don't know. I guess we'll find out at the end of May. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you all soon. Have a great day.